The first story out of the gate is told by one of the men in the group, and this is a knight. He's getting a little bit older in years, but he is trying to become or he has a questionable relationship with Parlamente, the wife of Hircan. So there is this weird dynamic going on behind the scenes of everything that they're all doing. With all of the characters, quite frankly, it's very difficult to get a sense of it. But anyway, he's going to tell a story, and he gets to tell the first story, and it's a curious little story, and it comes off as very Boccaccio. It is a story of, in the town of Alençon, during the lifetime of the last Duke Charles, there was a procurator by the name of Saint Agnan. He had married a noblewoman of the region who was more beautiful than she was virtuous. And so automatically you get the dynamics of this. It's lower nobility working for the royals. And the wife is of a higher station than the man. So you know automatically that this is being set up as a question mark, because that's not supposed to happen. Men are supposed to be superior. And of course, the woman is evil. She is more beautiful than she was virtuous. Just a few lines down, they reference the husband failed to notice the wicked behavior of his wife because she is having an affair with the bishop. Now, the bishop doesn't come in for an awful lot of criticism here, but the wife takes it all. It's all her fault. That slut. The wretched woman. And so the bishop continued his affair with the wretched woman, who for her part continued to do the bidding more out of greed than love. Really, he had a sense of a despicable human being. And in the course of having this extramarital affair with the local bishop, she also strikes up a relationship with a younger man. Again, a little bit of a power dynamic there that's supposed to be seen as unnatural. He is a younger man. She takes him into bed, and he falls madly in love with her. And the husband just sort of goes along and has to suffer for it. He is painted as a bit of a cuckold. He does not have the stomach to object. He just sort of goes along, especially with the bishop. Well, if your wife is sleeping with the bishop, maybe you get some perks. He is not painted in a particularly flattering light. They're going on with the affair, and the young man is starting to get qualms about it. And he shows up once when he's not supposed to, and the bishop's already there, and the bishop leaves, and he shows up afterwards, and he's starting to be a little bit awkward about it. Well, the wife is eventually arrested. The husband is arrested. The wife is the wife is punished. As for the depraved wife, she led a more immoral life than ever once her husband was out of the way, and died a most miserable death. She is considered quite, evil. But the story, as told by Simon Tuck, the man who is doing this, is very much a story of the evil woman. The woman who was just so immoral, so sexually rapacious, that she corrupted everyone around her and ruined everyone's life. And Simon Tuck ends the story and then says, and one of the advantages or one of the innovations from Boccaccio is that at the end of every Heptameron story, the little group has a rather spirited debate about the story itself. So they engage in the act of interpretation. They sit there and they argue about, well, what is this? What is that? And there's this active sense of reading as something more than just listening to the story and then starting the next story. Suddenly it's not just passing the time, but it's actually trying to find out what it means. Simon Tot comes and says, just consider now, ladies, the amount of trouble that was caused by one woman. Just think of the whole train of disasters that this one woman's behavior led to. I think you'll agree that ever since Eve made Adam sin, women have taken it upon themselves to torture men, kill them, and damn them to hell. I know, I've experienced feminine cruelty, and I know what will bring me to death and damnation, nothing other than the despair that I'm thrown into by a certain lady. So he's talking to one of the women, probably Parlamente, in this group, and he is using semi-coded language, and is leaving it up to his audience, including us, to interpret this, to come about it. So we're getting multiple levels of interpretation, multiple hints that we're not supposed to just sit passively by. And so if we're going to interpret this, we have to interpret his words as well and say, is that the most accurate explanation? Is this an accurate portrait of what this story is? I don't think so. Is it all her fault? Clearly she's not a good person, but do the men bear any responsibility in this? And that's where Heptameron begins, because the perspective of gender relations in Boccaccio tends to be a little bit more, well, in terms of sexuality, there's a lot of just, boys will be boys. In terms of the hierarchy, there's not a lot of question that men are supposed to be on top. And here you get the sense that, well, maybe this isn't the way it's supposed to be. Maybe this isn't what is ideal. Maybe we should reconsider this, reinterpret these realities of life to just try and get to something a little more equitable. And Parlamente jumps in. Parlamente, pretending she did not know what it was to herself that he was referring, replied, since hell is as agreeable as you say, you presumably have no fear of the devil who put you there. So again, you get the sense that she is talking to him in somewhat coded language that everybody can see. But also there is, she's inspired to lash back at him, not just because, I get the sense, not just because he seems to be, insinuating something directly to her, but also because the story itself puts women in a very unflattering light and pins it all on them. And the sexuality is just supposed to be, well, the men are in there and they're having a good time. And it's the woman who really just makes it all up, because it says that she was in it more for greed than for lust. And the notion of that greed and lust get synced throughout these stories, where you get the sense that it's not about sexuality at all. It's just the kind of irrational, lusty, rapacious attitude that you get from men. And the object can be greed or money, sex, war. All of these things are part and parcel of the same thing, and men are always chasing them very intently, need to get it. But the Heptameron is always saying, well, let's take a bigger look at this. Let's take a broader consideration. Sexuality is great, but in a certain context. Sexuality means more than just the animal act of it. And so there is a subtle but distinct change going on. Subtle but distinct are kind of opposites, I know. But you can see it. A change from the Boccaccio model where, and Chaucer also, sexuality is just sex. Heptameron, beginning very soon after this first story, it lays down, is going to change that perception. It lays down this story initially to essentially introduce the problem of the male perspective, blaming women from Eve onward not taking the fuller view of the image, not bringing in all of your interpretive skills to see what's really going on, what the dynamics of the world are really all about, and trying to ascertain the truth for once, the truth of humanity, stripping away these assumptions.